Before the mystery, before the headlines, and long before tragedy struck, there was a voice that captivated crowds, echoed through radios across America, and belonged to a man named Walter Scott. This is the story you haven't heard. The untold rise of an R&B star who was once on the verge of greatness. Walter Scott was born Walter Simon Nothius Jr. in 1943 in St. Louis, Missouri. He grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood surrounded by the rhythm of city life. It was the 1950s, an era when St. Louis pulsed with music. Blues, gospel, soul, and rock and roll all mingled in the streets and clubs. And in the middle of that vibrant cultural movement was a young man discovering he had a voice that could turn heads. Walter wasn't just a kid with dreams, he had raw talent. He stood out among his peers with a smooth yet commanding baritone that carried weight, emotion, and soul. People listened when he sang, not because he demanded attention, but because his voice simply deserved it. As he entered his late teens and early 20s, Walter's passion for music only intensified. He joined local groups, played in clubs, and eventually caught the attention of a band that was about to make history, Bob Kuban and the In-Men. This wasn't your average garage band. Bob Kuban had put together a tight, energetic ensemble with horns, rhythm, and a goal to blend soul and pop in a way that could cross musical boundaries. They weren't just playing covers, they were crafting something fresh. And Walter, with his soulful voice and clean-cut image, was the perfect frontman. In 1966, the group recorded a song that would define their careers and become a national sensation, The Cheater. The track was everything a mid-60s hit needed, catchy, upbeat, and full of energy. But it was Walter's vocal performance that elevated it to something unforgettable. With a sly delivery and emotional depth, he brought the lyrics to life. Look out for the cheater. He's gonna break your heart. The song climbed the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 12. It became an instant classic and earned the group a spot on music shows, radio stations, and even a few national tours. For a moment, it looked like Walter Scott was on the path to becoming a household name. But fame, especially in the 1960s, wasn't easy to hold onto, especially for emerging R&B acts who weren't backed by powerful labels or industry connections. Despite the success of The Cheater, Bob Kuban and the In-Men struggled to repeat their hit. The industry moved fast, and without another major single to build momentum, the band slowly faded from the national spotlight. The group eventually disbanded. Some moved on. Others gave up. But not Walter. He may have lost his place on the national charts, but he never lost his passion. He returned to St. Louis and kept performing. Not for fame, not for money, but because music was in his blood. Throughout the 1970s, Walter Scott continued to sing at clubs, weddings, and regional events. He performed solo and with various groups, keeping the spirit of soul and R&B alive in his hometown. And those who saw him during these years say he never lost his magic. Even if he wasn't on TV anymore, Walter commanded every stage he stood on. His voice had matured, richer, deeper, filled with the kind of emotion that only life experience can bring. He was a true entertainer. People came for the nostalgia of The Cheater, but stayed for the way Walter could make any song feel personal. Whether it was a Motown cover, a gospel standard, or something original, he gave it his all. Friends and fans alike described him as humble, grounded, and deeply passionate about his craft. He never bragged about his hit song. He never acted like a star. He just showed up, gave 100%, and made people feel something. In many ways, Walter represented a kind of working-class musical hero. The kind who doesn't chase the spotlight, but deserves it. He also devoted himself to family. He married, raised children, and built a life that many would consider quiet and meaningful. He wasn't jet-setting around the country, but he was living a life rooted in love, performance, and community. But despite the joy music gave him, Walter never stopped dreaming of another breakthrough. In the early 1980s, he talked about returning to the studio, maybe recording a solo album, maybe giving his career one last push. He believed he had more to share. And the truth is, he did. He had a powerful voice, a loyal fan base, and decades of experience. He wasn't a one-hit wonder. He was a man whose talent hadn't been fully discovered. But just as Walter began plotting his next move, fate took a dark and unexpected turn. In 1983, he disappeared. For years, that story would dominate every conversation about Walter Scott. But before the darkness, before the betrayal and the headlines, we must remember that there was light. There was triumph. There was music. Walter Scott's rise wasn't like that of a superstar. It was the rise of a man who loved what he did, who worked tirelessly for his art, who touched the lives of thousands even if the world never fully saw his worth. He wasn't driven by fame. He was driven by feeling. And if you ever heard him sing live, you'd know it wasn't just a performance. It was a connection. People like Walter are the soul of American music. They don't always get the magazine covers or the platinum plaques, but they're the ones who build the foundation, who keep the genre alive, who remind us that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones history nearly forgets. Today, when we hear The Cheater on an oldies station or in a retro playlist, we hear more than just a catchy hook. We hear Walter Scott's spirit, his journey, his dream. And while the world remembers the tragedy that ended his life, we owe it to him and to music itself to also remember how it began. With heart, with hustle, and with one of the most unforgettable voices R&B has ever known. This was the rise of Walter Scott.